Hi there, and welcome to another mental health lesson on this channel. My name is Wisdom, your host, a trainee clinical psychologist. Today, our focus is on generalized anxiety disorder, and this is a follow up on the lesson we began on anxiety. And the link to that video is up in the card. You may want to listen to that. We discussed earlier how being anxious or feeling some fear or anxiety towards particular situations or events is normal, it's part of our human experience. However, when this sense of fear and anxiety about situations, events become pervasive, become excessive, and become prolonged, such that it is affecting the individual's functioning, everyday functioning, and their productivity, then that becomes a source of concern because we may be dealing with an anxiety disorder. And so we looked at some tips on how to manage your anxiety levels, um, aside seeing a professional mental health practitioner to help you to cope or recover. You could look at how your self-talk may be affecting you. So we looked at self-talk and how you can develop a positive self-talk. We looked at the Beck anxiety inventory, which you can use as a self-report measure just to assess your anxiety levels. Very simple way, and to trace or track how you may or may not be experiencing high or low levels of anxiety. So today's lesson, we are moving into the types of anxiety disorders. So this is for the purpose of education. This is the purpose of enlightening, so that having a good understanding of the symptoms of some of the types, you may be able to recognize if yourself or any other person you know may be experiencing any of these types, and therefore seek the necessary psychological help or support from a licensed practitioner within your jurisdiction. So we will look at anxiety disorder number one, generalized anxiety disorder. And this is one of the more, as the name suggests, general forms of anxiety, and it is generalized because the individual's fear, the individual's pervasive, prolonged, excessive fear or anxiety is about various or different kinds of issues in their life. So the APA Dictionary of Psychology defines this as excessive anxiety or worry about a range of concerns. So world events, finances, health, appearance, family members, friends, work, school, different things are a source of excessive anxiety and worry to the individual. They just can't, be themselves concerning various things about their life. There's always this feeling of restlessness, fatigue, issues of concentration, muscle tension, sleeplessness, irritability, and any of the other symptoms we looked at previously concerning anxiety. And so the key thing about generalized anxiety disorder is that the individual's anxiety, which is beyond or out of proportion to what is actually leading to that sense of anxiety or fear, meaning that it's excessive, it is pervasive. Pervasive means it's affecting different aspects of the individual's life. So at school, they may be struggling to concentrate, they may be struggling with their assignments, struggling to perform, at work, at home. So different aspects of their life is affected, meaning that it's pervasive. And this is prolonged. And it's not particularly tied to one issue of concern or one aspect of their life. The worry is generalized, so to speak, and that is GAD, Generalized Anxiety Disorder. We'll look at some of the key symptoms from the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the current version DSM-5 TR. And in the DSM-5 TR, it gives us some idea of what to be looking out for. And if you see a practitioner, a mental health practitioner, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, a mental health counselor, um, you are likely going to be taken through some assessment using the psychometric test, basically one that I'll be showing us in a moment. The GAD-7 is one of the instruments that is used to assess generalized anxiety disorder. You'll be taken through some interview, ask some questions to understand your experiences. And these are some of the things that should be present if the individual is or may be going through generalized anxiety disorder. So the excessive anxiety or worry, so the apprehensive expectations, what I call the what if syndrome. So there's this bit of anything about the individual's life, they are worried about the future, they are worried about what would go wrong. So there's this bit of what if it goes wrong, what if it doesn't work, what if something bad happens, what if, and that is the preoccupation of the person. It makes them apprehensive of tomorrow. So the apprehensive expectation occurs more days than not for at least 6 months. So that's within a duration of time that you are assessing yourself, or you are being assessed for generalized anxiety disorder. The expectation is that excessive anxiety and worry and the symptoms related to that has been occurring more days. So let's assume, so within a 6 months period, within a week, you have the symptoms of restlessness, sleeplessness, irritability, and all the physical symptoms, psychological symptoms appearing probably 5 times or 5 days in the week. So more days than not, you experience those symptoms or signs associated with GAD. And the anxiety or worry, which is appearing more days than not within a particular 6 months duration, continuous, is about a number of events or activities such as work or school performance, finances, family life, and all that. We all worry, we all have some fears. If you have an exam, you will be a bit anxious, and that will kick in your need to prepare. So feeling some bit of anxiety is okay, but in this case, the anxiety and worry is excessive, it's out of proportion, it is dysfunctioning the individual, it is distressing the individual, and it is occurring more times than not in relation to different aspects of their life and situations surrounding them. And the key highlight also is that you find it difficult to control that worry. It's difficult. It's not just like one of those worries where you can brush it aside or someone talks to you and just you just overcome it. The individual struggles to control the worry, whether by themselves or when they are being helped. It takes time to get over that fear, that anxiety, and that is why you need professional help with a counselor, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, if you realize that your symptoms are becoming so difficult to handle, you are going through a lot of distress. Rather than keep quiet, you need to talk, you need to speak out, talk to someone. That is one of the key things we discussed previously in the overview of anxiety. Talking to someone is one of the ways that you are able to help yourself gain control of the situation. So the individual finds it difficult to control the worry. The anxiety, worry, or physical symptoms cause a significant distress to the person. And this is something that is determined by the fact that, one, you are struggling with a number of things that on the usual you should be able to do. So if you're a student, you are struggling to keep up with your assignments, you are struggling to keep up with concentrating during lessons. There's a lot that is happening that is making you feel that you have lost control or you are not in charge. There's the fear that you fail the course. There's the fear that you would be unable to graduate. There's a lot of fears that are not necessarily justified, and this is causing you to suffer significant distress, and you are struggling to sleep, you are struggling with your interpersonal relationships. If you're a worker, your work productivity is going down, and many important areas of functioning are affected. So in differentiating what is normal and what is abnormal behavior, would usually use what is called the 4Ds of the abnormal behavior. So is the situation causing distress to you? Is the situation posing a danger to you or to others? Is the situation causing you to be dysfunctional? And is the situation causing a certain deviation from what is the norm within that context you live in, or within the context of the response that you are giving to whatever situation is at hand? So if we look at all of these dimensions, and it seems your levels of anxiety and worry and the symptoms associated with it are meeting those criteria of distress, dysfunction, danger, and deviance, any of them or all of them, then there could be a sign for concern. Lastly, the worries associated with GAD are more pervasive, pronounced, and distressing, which is something we have mentioned earlier. So it's pervasive, affecting different aspects of your life. So if you're a parent, your children are beginning to suffer because you are more withdrawn, you are quite sensitive to criticism or being corrected. You shout at the least provocation, and things that shouldn't even make you angry are getting you angry because of that struggle to gain control of the worries around you in different related activities or events. And it's pronounced, it's clear for us to see that this individual is really going through some distressing time. The worrying is quite pronounced, it's clear, and it's placing a very high demand on you emotionally. It's causing a lot of distress, longer duration, and it frequently occurs without precipitants. So precipitants will be the things that would ID more like the triggers. And in most cases, the triggers of the individual's continuous excessive anxiety are things that should not even be leading to that excessive response of anxiety. And sometimes there's not even any trigger, there's no obvious trigger. It's just the what if bit of the individual that creates situations that do not even exist. And if you try to understand how these are affecting you or affecting the individual, you'll be able to address them as we discuss later. So these are some of the key things in relation to GAD. So the what if syndrome. So we are always looking out for what will go wrong. There's this negativity that is associated with GAD. So if we hear someone call us, so an individual with GAD, for instance, may see 3 missed calls and then begin to over exaggerate the reason why they may have been called that consistent 3 times. So if it's a colleague that called, then there are negative images that begin to come in. If it's your boss that called, what if I'm sad? How this person will be so angry with me, and we begin to form a lot of possibilities that are negative, that may not even exist in the first place, actually, because there's a lot of thoughts running through about what could go wrong, about many things, different aspects of the individual's life. What are some of the risk factors? As we mentioned under the first video on anxiety, there are no particular causes of anxiety disorders, and in this case, generalized anxiety disorder. But some factors have been noted that as possible, causes, or certain, factors that could make you vulnerable or contribute to developing GAD. The first category, we look at temperamental factors, primarily relating to personality and also temperaments and related behavior changes. So behavioral inhibition, negative affectivity, neuroticism, which with neuroticism is one of the components of what we call the big five personality traits. So it's a personality type that is characterized by a lot of emotionality, difficulties controlling emotions, hypersensitivity. So hypersensitive to emotional, information, criticism, and all that. Easily angered, a number of negative emotional expressions or behaviors. People that are quite withdrawn, people that are more or less introverted, and sometimes it becomes quite excessive, that it inhibits them in many ways. So such persons may have a lot of fears that probably have developed because of other factors under environmental related issues. So childhood adversities and parenting practices. If you had parents who were overprotective, over controlling, and it has a toll on the individual growing up. There's this fear of being judged, there's this fear of being looked out for and punished, and so that's syndrome of what if something goes wrong, what if I end up failing, what if about many things could be coming from childhood adversities and issues relating to parenting. And reinforcement of avoidance growing up, the more you try to avoid things that are difficult to handle, the better you feel, and you couldn't come to the point where you are able to face things as they are, and deal with issues, overcome them, or address them before you move on. So that bit of avoidance behavior has been encouraged over time, and it could contribute to the development of the symptoms related to generalized anxiety disorder. So under temperamental factors, we have personality related issues, harm avoidance, attentional bias, reward dependence. We'll talk about something in relation to attentional bias, which is selective, selective abstraction. And the environmental factors, as I mentioned, childhood experiences that are quite traumatic or negative, and parenting styles that may have dampened the child's ability to stay in control or feel more confident in themselves and their abilities. And there are also genetic factors relating to family history. So chances are that if you have a family member who had GAD or any of the anxiety disorders, chances are that latter individuals in the family line may also develop side. So if a parent is experiencing or had experienced GAD, chances are that either the children or grandchildren, it's likely that someone may also suffer from that. A lot is still yet to be found in the specific, specifics when it comes to genetics and neurological, factors, physiological factors. But there's indication that 1/3 of the risk of experiencing GAD is genetic. So there are some genetic factors that could contribute to developing GAD. So we'll discuss 4 key issues that are common with individuals experiencing GAD. Number 1 is overgeneralization, overgeneralizing, overestimating the negatives that could be present in a situation. So more or less making it look bigger than it is, looking worse than it actually is. We have catastrophizing, intolerance of uncertainty, and selective abstraction. So overgeneralization is the projection of your experiences and results from one event. So you failed an exam, and now over time, the individual is just concerned about how they will fail any exams that they take because they had failed an exam before, and that failure had a certain impact on them, and they didn't get the right support to overcome the difficulties associated with that failure. So they begin to project such an experience into other experiences or situations that may or may not even be similar to what they had previously. So that is overgeneralization. You meet a gentleman who disappointed you, and now throughout the person's life, in many aspects, in different aspects of their life, when they are interacting with men, they have this thing that this man will disappoint me, this man will deceive me, so this woman will deceive me, whatever way it is. They've had an experience with someone in business before, and the disappointment that they had, how this individual duped them, has taken so much toll on the person that since they were not able to properly handle the disappointment, they begin to feel, nervous. They become hesitant, very, apprehensive with any ideas relating to starting a business together with someone, or even venturing into any partnership with someone. So there's this projection of experiences and results from one event to every other event or situation. Individuals experiencing GAD are likely to associate every current or future occurrence to something that happened in their past that is isolated. So just be a one-off case, but this individual would always want to point to that particular incident and how that is what will happen now or in the future if they attempt something new. So there are some examples of overgeneralization statements. I will never be able to pass a job interview, probably because they failed a job interview before, or they went for a job interview. Maybe they did well, but they couldn't meet the cut. So they begin to feel that they put in all that they could but failed, and therefore any other interview they will have going forward, they will not be able to pass it. All men are terrible and wicked. Everybody hates me. Out of all the people in this world, you feel that everybody hates you. And that could be an experience from the past that was quite traumatic. That was something that they were not able to overcome properly. Since my parents had a bad marriage, I'll also have a terrible marriage. So they grew up seeing that their parents had a terrible marriage. They saw all the difficulties, all the abuse and all that. And, they begin to feel that every marriage is like that, and their marriage will be like that. It will be safe. They have a difficulty controlling such a worry, even in the evidence of other marriages that are good and healthy and beautiful. They just can't overcome that fear that when they also marry, they will have a terrible marriage that will lead to divorce. So these are just some of the ways of overgeneralizing, putting so much weight on a matter just because of a past experience that may or may not be even similar to that particular situation in question. Catastrophizing is another one of the issues that you find common with GAD, and it's a cognitive distortion, just like the overgeneralization, where the individual is consistently anticipating calamity. So it's like anything that we are discussing, always sensing doom at the end of the day. So there is a consistent anticipation of calamity or misfortune from an otherwise minor situation. So here are some examples. So failing an exam is a sign that you will become a jobless man or woman in the future. So I write a test and I fail, and I believe that failing this test means that in future I'll be jobless. That is out of proportion to what a test failure should be doing to me. So yes, someone will feel bad about failing an exam, but in such a case of GAD, the individual is consistently forecasting a calamity or misfortune that does not really, in quotes, apply to whatever failure or trigger event that is happening. A pain in the chest. So I feel some pain in the chest. I remember one time I had some pain in the chest and I needed to seek medical attention for that. But someone who is experiencing GAD, excessive, pervasive, pronounced, consistent, anxiety and worry about different aspects of their life, would now be saying that this is a potential heart attack and I will die or may die from this. But probably that's just a little chest pain that, with the right, probably rest or seeking medical attention, that should be fine. But because they've had people having a chest pain and they died, or probably, read about cardiovascular diseases, heart attacks, and all that, there's this sense that that chest pain, that headache could mean that I will also die. And that is something that you would find a bit weird, but it is common with individuals that are going through GAD. A sick person believing that they will never get well and that the illness can get only worse. And you keep trying to encourage this person and all that, but it seems they just can't get over that fear that the illness will keep getting worse and worse and worse. It doesn't mean that someone, who does this or feels their sickness is getting worse and will only get worse is experiencing GAD. As I mentioned, in diagnosing, there are other factors that are put into consideration. So there are some bit of dynamics around diagnosing individuals with specific mental health conditions. This is just an overview of some of the things that could be happening and what they could be telling you. Then the next one is intolerance of uncertainty. So individuals experiencing GAD have a certain high level of intolerance for something that is not clear, for events that are not certain. So there's this fear of the unknown that is common with GAD and some other forms of anxiety disorders. So there's a lower tolerance for uncertainty. Individuals find situations or events that are characterized with suspicion and uncertainty and lack of clarity and not being assured. They find it distressing. It stresses them up. It's like puts some fear in them because they are not so assured. They need to be very assured, very certain about whatever they are doing before they set out to do it. So you find this person always, looking out for what could go wrong in your discussions. always complaining about how things would go wrong, how they would suffer, and all that, how tomorrow is not predictable, and how you don't need to take the step because things could go wrong. And this is like has become a pattern. It's like it's become uh, an anthem. And anything that tries to not assure them or bring some bit of suspicion to them is a whole lot of distress, and called evokes a lot of apprehension. So these individuals will often try to avoid activities or situations that are filled with uncertainty. They always are seeking or giving excessive assurances before taking any action. So you see a parent probably who has issues with GAD, always calling just to be sure the child is fine, even when there's this bit of care that makes you want to be sure that your loved one is okay. But you find it becoming excessive when in a relationship there's this possessive nature happening, always wanting to be sure that the other person is fine, always wanting to be sure, always so there's this excessive seeking of assurance. If they need to take any action, any step, any project, you need to keep giving them assurance, keep assuring them, keep reminding them of their strength and all that. And you also give a lot of assurances because they just can't get over the fear that things may not go right. And the last we talk about is selective abstraction. So the bit about attentional bias coming in. So this is the tendency to focus on one aspect of a situation, which is the negative aspect. So what is not going well, while ignoring all the positive aspects of the same situation, what is going well. So it's like a certain blanking of the positive is happening. And usually through psychotherapy, the individual will be helped to begin to broaden their perspective. So that's what cognitive behavior therapy helps you to do through what we call psychoeducation, helping you to begin to see things that probably you are overlooking and helping you to develop a new perspective of self, of others, and of the future. So selective abstraction, the individual seems to have blocked the positives and allows the negative aspects of events in their life to outweigh or take precedence over the positive ones. So you try to bring out the positives, and it's like your mind keeps going back to the negative. So you can only imagine an accident, you can only imagine failing the exam, you can imagine how you go hungry, you can imagine how you lose your child during the birth process. So there are positives that can be taken from the situation, including how others have been helpful, how you are getting better and better in what you do and all that. But that seems to have been overshadowed a lot of times by the negatives that the individual selectively seems to be focusing on. So ignoring all the positive comments made by others on your presentation just because one person or a few people said they weren't impressed. And remember, we said in order to qualify as a disorder, there should be a continuous, exhibition of such symptoms as related to the disorder. So there's persistent, evidence of that happening. And in GAD, we mentioned how this should be persistent, pervasive, and should be happening more days than not within at least 6 months in a time frame of assessment. So there's this thing happening almost all the time. The individual just can't, focus on all the positive comments that have come from people about how they are dressed, about how they did a good job. Just because probably in the meeting as I was talking, I saw someone was not laughing or smiling. Although others were smiling and laughing, selective abstraction, which is common with GAD, will mean that the individual is only focused and disturbed by the fact that there's somebody not smiling while I'm presenting, there's somebody not laughing, and somebody didn't talk to me, even though they had many other people or a few other people saying that they were impressed, laughing and smiling and giving them all the commendations. Like the example is brooding over a mistake you made in an exam or test, although you did great in answering the questions overall. So consistently over time in different, examinations or tests and all that, you find the individual is always so worried. They can't sleep. They are restless. They are having a difficult time because during the exam, they remember or realize that they made a mistake somewhere. So now that mistake overshadows all the good questions or answers they gave for all the other questions and how they did well and all that. The positives are hidden by a selective abstraction of the negative in that situation or event. So the mistake that was made becomes what is their source of worry, although there are other aspects that they could be looking at and be happy or more satisfied with. So those are the 4 key things we want to say are common issues with GAD: overgeneralization, catastrophizing, intolerance of uncertainty, and selective abstraction. So what are some tips for addressing symptoms of GAD? Would talk about how we can challenge GAD-related thoughts, and this is applicable in other anxiety disorders as well. And this is a CBT model. CBT stands for cognitive behavioral therapy. The idea with CBT is mainly that your thoughts affect your feelings and then your actions, or thoughts play a role in our behavior or our actions and in our emotions. So there's this connection between thoughts, emotions, and behaviors or actions. And so when you are able to help the individual address negative thoughts or dysfunctional thoughts, ways of thinking, belief systems, then it will help to change the emotions associated with whatever beliefs or thoughts there is. And that also helps to change behavior. And you also help by changing certain behaviors, actions that are dysfunctional. So there are certain steps that are taken through therapy to help you to change certain behaviors that may not be helping you or may be fueling your anxiety. So this model is just 4 key things, 4 key steps. Number 1 is to identify the anxiety-inducing thoughts or beliefs. And in the previous video, one of the key things we talked about was thought journaling. So having a thought diary. And this comes in handy here. When you realize that you are always worried and anxious about so many things, different aspects of your life, and things that shouldn't really get you worried. You are excessively, pervasively, consistently worried about them. You want to make time to write down these thoughts, these beliefs that always make you want to feel that things will go wrong. So the bit about examination, what is the thought? The thought is that I will fail. Write it down. What is the belief? I have failed before and therefore I'll fail again. I'll never get employed because I'm not good at interviews and all that. So you want to identify the anxiety-inducing thoughts or beliefs and write them down. So if you are dealing with a therapist, this is likely something they'll be doing with you if you are going through CBT, helping you to identify those thoughts, those negative thoughts, unhealthy thoughts that always keep you anxious. So you write them down. Self-awareness is very important. If you do not examine what causes you to be anxious and know them, be self-aware, you will not be able to proceed anywhere. So identify the anxiety-inducing thoughts or beliefs. Number 2, step 2 is to provide evidence for the negative thoughts or beliefs that you have identified. So what is the evidence for those thoughts? So you believe that you will fail the exam. What are the evidences that you have? How many exams have I failed in my life? Okay, so right from primary or preschool or whatever it is, how many exams or tests, assessments have you failed? You want to try, you may not necessarily record, but you want to, yes, I failed in primary three, I failed this and that. The ones that you can recall, put them down. The relationship, I'll never settle. What is the evidence that you have for the fact that you will never get married or you never get anybody who is good for you? What is the evidence? Write it down. Now, after putting down your evidence for the negative thoughts you have about yourself and how things will go wrong, the what ifs, the next step, step 3, is to challenge the evidence by reframing the situation. And in reframing the situation, you are now coming to provide evidence against the negative thoughts or beliefs that you have. So the fact that you look through your lifetime and you have been failing exam, are there not instances where you have written a test, a quiz, an exam, and you passed? Probably your favorite subject, you have always been having 80 and above or something in that. Do you not have people around you who have also failed an exam before and are still able to graduate? Don't I have people around me who have been in relationships that they had their hearts broken and now they are happily married? Have I not heard of such instances? Do I not know people who have lost their job and they stayed jobless for 8 or so years and they finally got a job? So now you are beginning to reframe the situation that you thought is the worst thing that can happen or will happen, and beginning to look at the evidence that is available to suggest that that thing shouldn't really be a source of excessive worry to you. So you challenge the evidence by providing a contrary evidence against the negative thoughts and reframing the situation. Uh, this is something that your therapist will help you to do in professional counseling or clinical um, sessions. And the last step is to test your new way of thinking about or viewing the situation. So now that I've been able to reframe the situations around my finances, my children, my family, my relationship, and all that, as I do that consciously all the time, being self-aware of those anxiety-inducing thoughts, providing evidence for them, and challenging those evidences. Now I want to test my new way of thinking. So now as you are walking and people are having a discussion and they start laughing, rather than you saying that they are gossiping about you and probably they are plotting something against you, now you have learned to reframe situations and provide evidence against the negative thoughts. Probably these are individuals that were having their discussion and they are having fun and they are happy. Just as I would also be in a conversation with my friends and will laugh and be happy. Should people who are passing by think we are discussing them? No. So now you want to test your new way of thinking about or viewing situations in different settings that you are engaged in. It's difficult, but it's something that you have to consciously practice, and especially with the help of a professional counselor, psychologist, or mental health practitioner, or even with friends or family who are able to understand your challenges with anxiety and how they could support you to be able to really look at situations all the time in a better way, getting uh, a more rational perspective, a more healthy, um, uh, a more realistic perspective is very important in challenging the GAD related thoughts, the what if syndrome. So these are the 4 key steps in challenging the GAD related thoughts that fuel all the anxiety that is associated with the condition. Now we'll end with these tips for managing generalized anxiety disorder. Number one, which is similar to what we've discussed previously, is thought journaling, having a thoughts diary. Very important. Having a thoughts diary. It's important. Self-awareness. Socrates says that an unexamined life is not worth living. So it's important that you know what is going on, so that as you know yourself and what keeps you anxious, you can be able to work on it. And these are the four key things you can use in thought journaling. So if you have your diary where you daily keep the negative thoughts, the negative fears, the unrealistic expectations of doom and all that. Number one, what happened? So during the day, what happened? So I had news from a friend that so and so was sick. That's what happened. I had a call that one of my favorite people or someone I love is ill or sick or is in the hospital and all that. So that is what happened. Number two, what were my thoughts? What were my thoughts, initial thoughts? And you know, as someone who is experiencing GAD, you are likely going to have overgeneralized, or you may have, done a selective abstraction. You may have, catastrophized. You may have overestimated what is happening. Oh, and what if he doesn't recover, and and if it gets worse, and which hospital, and you hear the name of the hospital, and then you begin to think about how somebody went to that particular hospital and the person died because the nurses were not good. And so all these thoughts that were coming to you, you want to list them down. All these thoughts that were coming to you, want to list them down, some of them down, or all of them if you can. How did that make you feel? With all these thoughts that were coming to you, how did it make you feel? It made me sad. It made me feel a bit restless. It made me nervous and all that. And then finally, number four, what did I do? So I immediately asked to go and see the person in the hospital, or I couldn't sleep, or whatever it is. I complained a lot, or whatever happened. What did you do in that situation? You note it down. So that is how you could be journaling your thoughts. So what happened? What were my thoughts? How did I feel because of those thoughts? And what did I do? And going through this helps you to notice how your thoughts affected your feelings and your actions at the end of the day. So if you can reframe, so this person is sick, has been rushed to the hospital. So rather than all the evidence you were providing for the fact that someone went there and died and things could get worse and all that, why do you not now look at it from the perspective that you have fallen ill before and you got better? Someone has gone to that hospital and recovered. It's not everyone that goes to that hospital that dies. So in trying to reframe the situation, now you realize that what your thoughts will be in a similar situation will be more positive, realistic, and functional. And it makes you feel a bit more calmer. And then you do something, take a step that is well thought through, that is well, reasoned out. You will not do things out of an emotional, reaction. So that is how you could go about the thoughts journaling. It's very helpful for GAD and other anxiety-related disorders. The next thing is to practice cognitive and imaginal disputation. And this is something that you would also be doing as you are going through your thought journaling and the reframing process. Cognitive disputation is what you do as you are doing the reframing. So all the thoughts that were coming that were negative, I'm trying to find more positive reasoning patterns to replace the negative ones. So I'm disputing the negative beliefs and thoughts with more realistic, functional thought patterns. And in imaginal disputation, most often as The individual is catastrophizing, overgeneralizing, and abstracting only the negatives and all that. There's this bit of imagining the worst happening. So, and our mind is so powerful. So, what you imagine could happen, what you are seeing in your mind's eye, takes an effect on you, and your stress response kicks in. All the cortisol, all the adrenaline, all the systems that are responsible for kicking in your fight or flight mode of stress response set in because of the kinds of things you are imagining. So as you are imagining such negatives, you want to catch yourself and begin to imagine, have a picture of that journey that you are on, going on successfully and arriving at your destination and going to do what you were going there to do. So having images of a successful outcome in that exam and all that. So it's something that you can do on your own, but you would be more effective in going through imaginal and cognitive disputation if you have a practicing therapist, psychologist, clinician, counselor, helping you with the process. And it's really helpful so that over time you'll be able to manage the physical symptoms of restlessness, rigidity, and muscle tension and all that by imagining more realistically positive scenarios and allowing more healthy positive thoughts to reign in how you are visaging or uh, your expectations about the future will be. The last we'll talk about is engaging in relaxation exercises. This is something that is going to be running through a lot of discussions around some of the mental health conditions. In stress, the video on stress, the videos, 2 videos I did on stress, relaxation exercises, very important. In the video I did on intrusive thoughts and how to deal with them, exercising and relaxation techniques, very important. So these are techniques or exercises that you can find videos online to help you to do. PMR is progressive muscle relaxation exercises, and it basically helps you to know the difference between a tensed muscle and a relaxed muscle. So you'll be taken through a whole procedure, either starting from the upper part of the body, the head downwards to the toe, or from the toe upwards to the head. And particular muscle areas will be tensed. You will be taken through tensing that muscle, and then relaxing that muscle. And by the end of those exercises of PMR, you would have learned how to relax your muscle in situations that make you feel anxious. So in more or less feeling anxious, where anxiety is building up and it's becoming excessive and distressing, knowing how to relax your muscles helps you to break that chain of the anxiety cascading into levels that you can't control. Deep breathing exercises, very helpful. It's common that when you feel a bit nervous, you take a deep breath and then you breathe out, and it just helps as though a certain load has been taken off you. So if it's a conscious practice you do, in taking deep breaths, controlled breaths, you can find some videos on that. Just search for deep breathing exercises and you find a number of them. Mindfulness meditation, and mindful living. I think on the CBT tips for handling stress, I discussed the 5 core mindful ways of living. Mindful seeing, mindful hearing, mindful smelling, mindful touching, and mindful tasting. So how we can use our 5 senses to be more mindful. And mindfulness is an exercise that helps you to stay in the present And in doing that, you are not judging the thoughts that come to mind. You are just allowing yourself to be in the present moment and feel the calm and the peace associated with whatever is around you. And there are various ways of practicing mindfulness. So you can find some exercises that help to relax the muscles. And you should also engage in regular exercising. Uh, as we've mentioned before, physical exercise boosts certain neurotransmitters in our system. The serotonin levels in our system go up with exercise, and serotonin helps with your mood regulation. And sometimes, by just taking some jogging, some aerobics, and showering down, it just helps to calm your system.